New developments tonight in the search for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, more than 4 months after she disappeared from her Tucson home. Volunteers in Mexico say they received a tip about where her remains could be. 12 News reporter Maria Stobbs is here with the latest. Maria?
Mark, that's right. This search group regularly looks for missing people, and they've helped find the remains of dozens of people in the Nogales area. But this is the first time they've received a tip that specifically mentioned Nancy Guthrie.
At 1:47 in the morning, the doorbell camera went dark. Not because the battery died, not because of a glitch. Someone standing outside an 84-year-old woman's front door reached up and made it go dark on purpose. Then they waited. 25 minutes passed. At 2:12 a.m., a motion sensor triggered in the backyard. At 2:28 a.m., something else disconnected. Her pacemaker, the application on her phone, the one that monitored her heart in real time, lost its signal. Nancy Guthrie was gone. And here is the detail that no one can fully explain more than 4 months later. The person who stood at that door the night she disappeared had already been there before. The Catalina foothills sit at the northern edge of Tucson, Arizona, where the desert meets the mountain and the houses get quiet enough that you can hear coyotes at night. It is the kind of neighborhood where people know their neighbors, where church attendance still marks the rhythm of the week, where an 84-year-old woman living alone is considered safe because she has always been safe. Nancy Guthrie had lived a long life built on that kind of quiet dignity. She was the mother of 3 adult children, a woman of faith, whose Sunday routine was as fixed as the sunrise. She attended church every week without exception. Her daughter, Annie, lived nearby. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, Annie dropped her mother off at home, watched her go inside, and noted nothing unusual. The garage door closed at 9:50 p.m. That was the last confirmed image of Nancy Guthrie in her own home. She never made it to church the next morning. That absence, that single broken routine, is what triggered the alarm. Annie called. No answer. She went to the house. Something was wrong. By noon on Sunday, February 1st, 2026, the Pima County Sheriff's Department had a missing person case. Within hours, it was something else entirely. What the public first understood about Nancy Guthrie was shaped almost entirely by who her daughter is. Savannah Guthrie, co-host of NBC's Today Show, one of the most recognizable faces in American morning television, went on air 2 days later to address the nation directly. She was composed barely. On behalf of our family, I want to thank everyone for the thoughts, prayers, and messages of support. Our focus remains on the safe return of our dear mom. That phrase, safe return, was doing a lot of work. Because by the time Savannah said those words, investigators already had reason to believe this was not a wandering case, not a medical episode, not an accident. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos said it plainly. There were things in the evidence that told them this lady is in danger. We did not say publicly, not yet, was what those things were. For 10 days, the public waited. Helicopters swept the desert terrain north of Tucson. The FBI canvassed the neighborhood. Volunteers searched the washes and trails surrounding the Catalina foothills. Nothing. No trace. No witness who saw her leave. No car on the road. No security feed from a neighboring street that placed Nancy Guthrie anywhere after that garage door closed. It was as though she had simply ceased to exist inside her own home. The silence was total. And then on February 10th, 9 days after she disappeared, the FBI released something. FBI Director Kash Patel posted directly to social media. The images were stark. A figure standing on Nancy Guthrie's front porch, masked, gloved, armed with a holstered handgun, backpack on, face deliberately angled away from the camera lens. The footage had not come easily. According to investigators, the recording devices at the home had been tampered with. Some footage was lost, some corrupted, some rendered inaccessible by the physical removal of equipment. But the FBI worked with private sector partners, including Google, and recovered what had been left behind in the back-end systems. Residual data that the suspect either didn't know existed or didn't have time to destroy. That is the first thing to understand about this case. The suspect knew the camera mattered. They reached up and physically disabled it. They covered the lens with leafy branches to block the field of view. They removed recording devices from the property. And yet the system kept records they never touched. Which tells investigators something critical about this person. This wasn't a spontaneous act, but also wasn't perfect. There was a gap in their knowledge. And that gap is where this investigation lives. When forensic analysts and former law enforcement began examining the released images, one detail emerged that reframed everything. The figure on the porch, the one with the backpack and the holstered gun, appeared in 2 separate images. But one of those images was not from February 1st. According to sources close to the investigation, one image was captured on a different day entirely before the abduction. The suspect had come to Nancy Guthrie's front door at least once before the night she disappeared. Sources later confirmed to Fox News that this prior visit occurred approximately 3 weeks before the abduction, in early January 2026. Think about what that means. Whoever took Nancy Guthrie did not act impulsively. They came once, possibly saw the camera, left, and then came back weeks later, prepared this time, masked, armed, with branches to block the lens. Investigators expanded their neighborhood canvas all the way back to January 1st, asking residents to check every recording device, every doorbell camera, every driveway sensor for anything suspicious in the month before she vanished. That 1-month window is not a standard investigative request. It is the shape of a surveillance operation. A ransom note arrived. The FBI confirmed it was being taken seriously, though it declined to verify whether those who sent it were the same people responsible for Nancy's disappearance. The note included 2 deadlines. The first passed without incident. The second passed on Monday, February 9th. Authorities did not publicly disclose what threats accompanied those deadlines, or what, if anything, happened when they expired. That silence was its own kind of statement. Former FBI agents and forensic experts who reviewed the released footage noted specific behavioral details in the suspect that pointed toward experience with operational planning. The deliberate face-away posture, never giving the camera a clean angle, is not instinctive behavior. Most people glance at a camera reflexively. This person never did. The gloves suggest awareness of fingerprint recovery. The mask, full face coverage, suggests awareness of facial recognition systems. The presence of a backpack on the night of the abduction, but its apparent absence in what sources believe is an earlier visit, has been noted by investigators as potentially significant. No explanation has been confirmed publicly. DNA evidence collected from the scene came back inconclusive. A neighbor reported seeing a white van in the area before the disappearance. It was investigated. It led nowhere confirmed. Investigators also confirmed they were looking into a utility box around the corner from Nancy's home, one showing signs of having been tampered with, alongside a reported power and internet outage in the hours surrounding the abduction. The sheriff confirmed the utility box tampering was not connected to the outage under investigation, but he confirmed both existed. 2 separate anomalies. Same night, same neighborhood, same 41-minute window. By May, nearly 100 days into the investigation, Sheriff Nanos told reporters that an arrest would be made at some point. That phrasing, at some point, was precise in its ambiguity. Not soon, not imminent, at some point. The FBI was still analyzing mixed DNA recovered from the property. The reward had climbed to $1.2 million. $1 million from Savannah Guthrie's family alone. Tens of thousands of tips had flooded the investigation. And yet publicly, no suspect, no named person of interest, no vehicle confirmed, no known motive beyond the ransom demand. Then something happened that investigators had not anticipated. A collective of volunteers in Nogales, Mexico, a group called Buscando Corazones, or Searching for Hearts, received an anonymous tip. The caller said Nancy Guthrie's remains were buried near the Mariposa port of entry, just across the border, near a stream, under a velvet tree. The group's leader, Ramona Guadalupe Ayala Ortiz, has guided searchers through the recovery of dozens of sets of remains in the Nogales area. Families still waiting for answers. She took the tips seriously. On May 16th, searchers alongside Mexican authorities combed the area. They found nothing. They returned. Nothing. A third search was being planned. The Pima County Sheriff's Office confirmed they were aware of the tip. They confirmed their investigation was ongoing. They said they had not been contacted by Mexican authorities about the search. Here is what the Nancy Guthrie case is not. It is not a random act. It is not the work of someone who stumbled upon an opportunity. Every forensic analyst who has reviewed the publicly available evidence reaches the same conclusion. This required planning, extended surveillance, knowledge of her routine, familiarity with her home's layout and security systems, operational discipline during the abduction itself. A retired Pima County Sheriff's detective, Robbie Mayer, who solved Tucson's primetime rapist case in 1986 after managing more than 4,000 leads, publicly stated his belief that investigators already have the suspect's name. Not publicly named, not arrested, but known. He noted that cases of this operational complexity, with this level of physical evidence, tend to narrow to a small field of viable suspects even when public announcements remain absent. The investigation is not cold, but it is quiet. Quiet, in this case, may be intentional. There is a pattern worth examining in how this abduction was constructed. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She lived alone. She had a fixed routine. Her home had visible security equipment. Her daughter was one of the most recognizable journalists in the United States. Each of those factors tells you something individually. Together, they form a profile of deliberate target selection. CertiK, a blockchain intelligence firm, published analysis suggesting this case may be connected to a $6 million Bitcoin ransom demand, framing Nancy Guthrie as what they called a proxy target, someone taken not for who they are, but for who they are connected to. A former FBI agent who reviewed that analysis publicly called it a significant breakthrough in understanding the case's architecture. The FBI has not confirmed or denied the cryptocurrency angle, but if accurate, it reframes the entire investigation. It means this was not about Nancy. It was about reaching someone through Nancy, an 84-year-old woman of faith living quietly in the Tucson foothills became a lever. Consider what that requires of the perpetrator. They had to understand Savannah Guthrie's financial profile at a level of specificity that came from research, not assumption. They had to believe the family had both the capacity and willingness to pay. They had to surveil Nancy long enough to understand her vulnerabilities. They had to know which night, which window, which systems to disable. And they had to move her out of that house, past 3 separate camera positions, past motion sensors, past a pacemaker monitoring application, without a single piece of clean footage surviving. The doorbell camera cut off at 1:47 a.m. motion detected at 2:12. Pacemaker signal gone at 2:28. 41 minutes. That is an extraordinarily tight window for a crime of this complexity. 41 minutes to cross every threshold, disable every system, take an 84-year-old woman with a cardiac device, and disappear into a desert night without a single neighbor noticing a vehicle. What this case has also exposed is a failure of a different kind. Not a failure of investigators, who by all public accounts committed significant resources from the first day and have continued doing so for months. A failure of assumption. The recording devices at Nancy Guthrie's home were tampered with before investigators could secure them. Evidence was lost, corrupted, physically removed. The FBI spent over a week working with private technology partners just to reconstruct a partial record of what happened at that front door. In a country where smart home technology is now ubiquitous, where tens of millions of homes have doorbell cameras, motion sensors, and cloud-connected devices, the Guthrie case exposed something deeply uncomfortable. The footage is not always there. The cloud does not always have a copy. The system is not as hard to beat as we believe. The person who took Nancy Guthrie knew that. They destroyed what they could. They blocked what they could. They removed what they could. What they left behind was only what they failed to anticipate. For months after her disappearance, the desert around Tucson holds its silence. Volunteers in Mexico search the banks of unnamed streams in response to anonymous calls from people who may know something or may know nothing. A $1.2 million reward remains unclaimed. Forensic labs still process inconclusive DNA, and Savannah Guthrie goes to work every morning, holds herself together on camera, and cries on the drive home. She said it herself. Every morning, every night. That is not a story about a television anchor. That is a story about a daughter whose mother walked into a garage in a quiet neighborhood and never came out the other side. Here is what has not been resolved. Not the investigation. The sheriff has said it will reach a conclusion. Something deeper than that. Nancy Guthrie was chosen, watched for weeks, possibly longer, by someone who understood her routines better than most people who loved her. And no one saw it. Not her neighbors. Not her family. Not the systems designed to protect her. The cameras recorded a figure who was already wearing a mask when he arrived, which means the mask went on before he stepped into camera range. He knew exactly where the cameras were. He knew what they could see. He knew what to block. He had already been there once to learn. That is not the profile of opportunity. That is patience. And patience, applied to a person instead of a problem, is something that surveillance systems were never built to detect. The Pima County Sheriff's Department is asking anyone with information to call 1-800-CALL-FBI or 520-351-4900. A $1.2 million reward is available for information leading to Nancy's safe return. She is 84 years old. She has a pacemaker. She has a family that has not stopped looking. If you follow this case, what detail do you think investigators are holding back from the public? And if the proxy target theory holds, what does it say about who is most vulnerable in a world where financial wealth is this visible and operational patience is this cheap? Leave your thoughts below. There's more to this case.